nerds, what's up? Today I thought I would talk about 5 character deaths in fantasy books that have haunted me and I think I will never get over. Now, to be clear, these aren't like the top 5 deaths that made me sad. There are a lot of deaths in a lot of fantasy books that made me extremely sad. But over time, I've maybe come to accept that they had to happen for the book to function the way it did, or they have to happen for the overall story, or time has dulled them. Today is going to be 5 deaths that either time hasn't dulled or I'm still reeling from the impact of those deaths in the series or book I'm talking about. Now, something else you might be wondering is, how are you doing this video without spoilers? I'll tell you. What I'm going to do is, before I name a character's death, I'm going to give you the book series and up to the book number that I will potentially be spoiling. And then I will pause to give you a second to pause and move to the next section, which I will have in the chapters below. I will have it by book series and number so that you can easily skip around to book series that you've read before. I did try to keep these 2 bigger series in general so that a majority of people will either be able to watch it because they've read it or because they'll never read the series and so they don't care if they're spoiled. Okay, good. We got it. I'll see you after the jump. Okay, so this first character is an interesting one that's slightly different than the others because it's not necessarily the character itself that I'm upset about, but rather what it kind of did to the rest of the fandom. Like, it was such an instrumental death, which is why it's on this list. So at number 5, I will be spoiling the Stormlight archive by Brandon Sanderson through book 3. So if you haven't read it yet, here's your time to pause and skip. We good? Okay, great. It's obviously, wow, my little cover's off there. It's obviously an Oathbringer when Elhokar dies. Now, look, did any of us love Elhokar? No, he was a bad king. He didn't make good choices, but he was in the process of changing, which is such an instrumental theme of the Stormlight archive, and indeed probably all of Sanderson's works, if we think about it. And so the manner of his death is so shocking, and I really do think it is a death almost like none other in all of Sanderson's works. Sanderson doesn't kill off a ton of characters. He definitely kills off a decent amount, but they tend to be under different circumstances. And so I felt that Elhokar's death in Oathbringer was a very different moment for the series. And also, it just sparked such fandom outrage over Moash. From Moash did nothing wrong to F Moash. It's just, and people are still talking about it, after Rhythm of War. That is a moment that I just feel like we keep coming back to. And because of that, I'm not sure if that death will ever get easier to read, despite how I feel about him as a character, which is also why I think that death being so affecting is fascinating, because it was less about him as a character and more about what he represented for the larger series. So that's a death I think I'll never get over for interesting reasons. Okay, number 4, I will be spoiling through book 13 of The Wheel of Time. So you basically need to have read the whole Wheel of Time. So you've been warned. You need to read the whole Wheel of Time. Okay, are we good? Great. So actually the death I'm going to talk about happens in Fires of Heaven, which is Moraine. And you're going to be like, Bookborn, Moraine doesn't die. And yes, we know that now. But when Moraine died in this book, Moraine was my favorite character in The Wheel of Time, still is my favorite character in The Wheel of Time. One of my favorite literary characters, actually just ever, fantasy characters. I just love her so much. And when I was reading The Wheel of Time, actually me and my husband were reading them together, and he was a book ahead of me for a while until he quit and I kept going. But he had warned me oh, someone dies in Fires of Heaven. And I was reading it and I was like, well, I'm going to be okay with any death except Moraine's. And then he was like, shouldn't have said anything. So Moraine dies. I was so upset. And I was so upset, and then I had to wait books on books. Let's see, that's book 5. So I had to wait 8 books for her to come back in Towers of Midnight. Here's the thing, though. Moraine never really comes back for me. And that was what was so painful for me while I was reading the series. And I wonder now that I'm more attuned to differing writing styles, if partly this was because of Sanderson, even though I think he did a great job. Like if that's part of it, or if it always would have bugged me what Robert Jordan had planned for Moraine. But she comes back and nothing feels the same. Her relationships with all the other characters aren't the same. We introduce this romance that I hate between her and Tom. I will always hate it. I will never see it. There is nothing you can say, even if you love it, that will ever convince me to like that romance. I hate it. Her relationship with Lan is super strained, which sucked because that was one of my favorite friendships in the series. It never felt like she came back. In fact, it was almost worse in some ways. Like she came back and didn't feel like herself. So I actually just don't think I'll ever get over Moraine's death. I'm still just always going to be upset about it. And yeah, I know there's a lot of deaths in Wheel of Time, but this is the hill I'm dying on. Okay, next up is the series A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, and I will only be spoiling through book 1, The Game of Thrones. So if you have seen season 1 or read book 1, you are safe to watch this. Now, you might be like, Bookborn, did you make this video just so you could continue to talk about the death in the Game of Thrones? And the answer is yes. This is my channel. I can do whatever I want. And if I'm not over it yet, I can still talk about it. Also, you've been warned, you should move on by now. Yes, Ned Stark's death in the Game of Thrones. I know I just read this book. I only finished it like 2 weeks ago. But I am positive I will never be over Ned Stark's death. And I stand by it. And I know everyone's going to be like, oh, just you wait. The series is crazy. There's so many more deaths. And I'm about to say something that's going to age like milk, but I just don't know how a death is going to upset me more than Ned's, because I feel like I'm expecting everyone else's deaths. And if you watched my Game of Thrones video review, you'll know that because I was like always seeing this poster and because of how much I heard his name, I think I was more predisposed to assume Ned could not die. And so I'm just still upset about it. And so yes, is it wild I'm putting this as my number 3 already? Yes, I don't care. Again, I can do what I want. I'm still not okay with it. And I think it's interesting because I know everyone's told me like, oh, the Game of Thrones is gonna feel like a prologue because Ned's death is really what sets off the rest of the series. And so I'll be very interested to see how that continues to loom large in the series. I know it does. But yeah, it took me by such surprise. I don't think I've ever had a harder time accepting that a character was dead. I think I messaged a few people that at one point I was like, well, Ned doesn't need a head. It's fine. He'll be back. So yeah, shocking. Okay, coming in at number 2, this is a series I think less of you will have read, which I don't understand why, because it's incredible. Please, if you like long, epic, high fantasy, go read it, which is the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. Now, I will be spoiling the whole series through book 4 of the series, Speaking Bones. So if you haven't read the series, first, I highly recommend you go pick it up. It is amazing. And second of all, don't watch this portion. Okay, are we good? So in Speaking Bones, my poor Timu dies. And I have to put him at number 2 because I feel like I'm the only person who cares about him as a character. And Timu was going through so much. Starting in Wall of Storms, his story is just so sad for me. And he never gets any credit for what he's doing. He's being abused, gaslit, all the things. His story is so sad. All he wanted to do was the right thing. And he constantly can't do the right thing. And what's funny is I had the amazing opportunity to interview Ken Liu after book 3, The Veiled Throne. And I said to his face, all I need is justice for Timu. And he laughed. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I read Speaking Bones, and it was like, no justice. If you guys don't remember his death scene because you didn't care about Timu, know to me, arguably the worst villain ever, who is the most worst, horrible person that I just hate with all my heart. He's having this moment where he's killed a bunch of people and it's awful. And I just was so convinced that this was going to be Timu's moment. Here it is. Here's where it's all going to turn around and it's all going to be okay. And then in the next scene we see them, Timu's dead, also beheaded. I think there's a theme here with traumatizing deaths for me in fantasy fiction. No justice. And I don't think I'll ever be okay with it. Okay, we've covered a lot of sad deaths. This next one wins the number 1 spot because I have been upset about it the longest. It has now been 15 years-ish. I don't know. That's an estimate. 15 years of being upset about this, and it hurts and rankles just as much as it did the first time. And this series will be Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling, which I'm guessing most of you have read, so you probably don't need to skip. And I will be spoiling through book 7. Now, there are a lot of deaths in Harry Potter that really upset me. Sirius particularly was one of my very favorite characters, so was Dumbledore. Those are upsetting. As an adult, I've learned to get over them because they were needed deaths in a kid's series. You can't have those mentors, especially when you get to book 7. Harry kind of needed to be on his own. I've come to terms with them. I've come to understand them. They hurt. A lot of the deaths hurt. But there is one in book 7 that I just don't think was necessary, and I'll stand by it. And that is, I don't know why I'm showing you the book. You know what book it is. Fred Weasley. It's never going to be okay. I'll never accept it. Splitting the twins was diabolical, shall I say. I will stand by that I think any other Weasley death would have made me less sad. It's a little tough toss-up. I think Ron would have been worse, obviously, because we spend the most time with Ron, and I know people love to hate on Ron because of how the movies betrayed him, but Ron is great in the books. So I will say Ron would probably upset me more. But barring Ron, I think the twins' deaths are worse than any other. Let them both die. You know what I mean? Like, both of them dying would have been better than one dying. And I have been haunted by this death. I will continue to be haunted by this death. It will never get better / easier for me. I will never forgive you, J.K. Rowling. That's my number 1 pick. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this kind of silly video about fantasy deaths that I'll never get over. There were definitely a lot of honorable mentions. I could put some books up here, but these are just the ones that I think I will still think about and feel like it could have gone differently and the book still would have worked, barring number 5, which is just more for its impact. So I would love to know some of your deaths. Here's the thing though, please, if you're gonna put a death that affected you, please put the book, like the book title or the series title, so that people don't get spoiled in the comments about books they accidentally want to read, and that I will not get spoiled for books I accidentally want to read. Even if you talk about the deaths in this video, maybe just quickly put the series title so people kind of have an idea. That would be kind. I know it's really hard to talk about this stuff, but it sucks not always being able to talk about spoilers, so here we are. Let's do our best. I'd love to know your opinions on the 5 I mentioned, what you think. Please let me know in the comments. And as always, if you like these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading, as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.